Hello, Lockdown Diaries, day 24. I did miss yesterday. We had a snotty boy, so I wasn't able to make a video yesterday. So just down in the speed shop today. And what I wanted to do today was just talk about how to ride a postie bike, or a Honda CT 110, as they're more commonly known. And the reason for doing this video is simply because, as I find when people come down to ride them, they're not always as instinctively easy to ride as you would imagine or hope them to be. I think mainly because, as you can spot, or might have spotted, there's no clutch lever, at least, but there is a gear shifter. And it's simply because it's got a centrifugal clutch like a C90. So the bikes effectively were built sort of 1960s onwards, 1970s onwards, and they were sold as trail bikes over in America predominantly, but also obviously built in Japan, but sold in Japan. And then probably the last 20 years or so, the Australian Postal Service were using them as delivery bikes. They were Honda. They're closely related to the Cub family, so the C90. I think the frame is almost identical or very similar, so an underbone single piece frame, under seat tank, twin shock rear, on this one high lift exhaust. But where it differs from the C90 is that it's got a telescopic regular telescopic front forks rather than those sort of up and over cantilever style forks on the C90. The 12 volt, and it's also got a very different engine, so it's a 4-speed 105cc with very few parts shared with the C90, or none, to be honest. So whenever I've needed parts for this, it's always been a case of either having them sent over, or there's David Silver over in the east in Norfolk, who's got a great museum if you're ever over that way, a Honda museum, and so he can get parts for it as long as you've got the VIN number or the part number. But yeah, so it's essentially a clutchless manual, which baffles people initially, and it really shouldn't do. So I'm just going to go through the basics of riding a postie bike. This one is Chloe. This is one of the bikes that came back. Well, this is a bike that I rode across the outback from Brisbane to Perth in 2019. So she's one of the 8 bikes that I've got down here. And to be honest, she's one of the highest mileage, or the second highest mileage after Dorothy, the bike I did the global trip on, but 73,000 kilometres, and actually runs really well. You know, it's a clear sign that mileage doesn't always relate to how well they ride. I've got bikes with less miles on that ride less well, to be honest, and a lot depends on who had it previously or who rode it during the mail delivery days. Because some would go on a fleet and be ridden by a different postal rider every day, others would be owned by contractors. So I would have the same rider every day, and I think that meant for better maintenance and care. But they'd be ridden for maybe 25,000 kilometres or 2 or 3 years on the fleet, and then they were auctioned off, and when they were being used, there'd be hundreds of these going through the auctions every month, pickles auctions in various cities in Australia. And you could pick them up for sort of $600 to $800, $900, and a bit like the C90. Since you can't get a new one, the prices have started to climb. So the Australian Postal Service stopped using these in 2013, 14, and then they swapped to a Chinese-made 110 Super Cub, which I don't think it's got a bit pokey. It's got fuel injection rather than carburetor. But I don't think they're as robust as these original Japanese engineered and designed, or Japanese built posties. And I think since then they've gone to an electric trikes, the postal service in Australia, so things are really starting to go downhill. But what really sets them apart, they've got the air filters in there and the air breather, the intake is there, so they are capable of wading through quite a lot of deep water. The postal versions didn't have the high-low gearboxes which people look for. The American version always had the high-low gearbox, and the agricultural version, which wasn't road legal in Australia, that also had the high-low gearbox. But these road-registered Australian postal bikes, they didn't have the high-low gearbox. What they did have, they had stiffer springs, front and rear, thicker grade spokes, and they engineered them with a square, you see that square block axle mount there, because originally they were rounded, and I believe they were cracking the axle out due to impacting on curbs and things like that. You might also notice they've got two side stands, so a side stand on the left, a centre stand as well, and then a side stand on the right, and that's mainly to deal with the camber of the pavement, because in Australia when they're delivering they can ride on the pavement. So if the delivering on one side and the camber of the pavement is downhill, then they can you know, they don't have to spin the bike around to get it to sit on the side stand. But otherwise, drum brakes front and rear, so not great brakes, but a simple operation. So if we come around to the business end, we've got the kill switch there. Always make sure that's facing towards you, that's off, on even, and then either side that's off, off, on, off. So kill switch, and that's normally when people can't start the bike, it's because that's to one side like that, and we've all done it. The key, the ignition, is just here. Turn that on, you get the green neutral light on there. You've got neutral on the gearbox is all the way down at the bottom. So neutral's at the bottom, and then it's four up. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 4 back down. So actually it's very easy to find neutral in it. You've also got the heel kicker on it, so instead of going up with the toe, you can go down with the heel. And actually, because it's quite stiff, there's a lot happening when you do that. There's a lot of mechanics at play, and it's quite stiff. So I find it easier to go down with the heel, or sorry, up with the heel. So for an upshift, I go back, heel, heel, and then down, down. To change gear, it's as simple as thinking of it as like a bike with a clutch, but without a clutch, if that kind of makes no sense at all. So you've got to roll off the power when you've got to change, but instead of pulling in the clutch, you just change the gear. So it's actually just tricking your mind into thinking you don't need to pull a clutch lever in, but you have to ride it in every other sense, like a typical machine. And I find what people try and do, they get cross between a normal bike and a twist and go. So they'll keep it pinned and go up through the gearbox or down through the gearbox, and that's when you get the horrible crunching noise. It needs to be rolled off. The revs need to die on it before you select the gear. I'll put a video link up that explains centrifugal clutches and how they work just in the description. But it's quite a simple process. When the bike's stationary, or when the engine's stationary, the clutch is disengaged, and then as you start to spin up the engine, it engages and then delivers power. So it's quite a simple process. It's just beyond my ability to explain it. Okay, so we're going to try and demonstrate how it actually works in practice. So we've got the kill switch is set to on, got the ignition on. We've found neutral with the green light, so we've stamped all the way down, so neutral's at the bottom. We pulled out the kickstart, and you just want to find top dead centre, so just find that little bit of resistance. You don't need a big kick, you don't need a big swing at it. That's all it takes. No throttle, just a touch of a pick-up when it starts to bite. So you just come around this side. So while I'm in neutral, bike's happily ticking over. I put it into first, so I'm in first gear now. I've got no clutch to pull in. The clutch is activating on its own, so I'm stationary. All I need to do to drive forward now is just to go this way. Little slide. And when I come up to a standstill, so say I'm coming up to traffic lights or something, that's it, I'm still in first gear, the clutch is engaged again, it's taking drive away, so the engine and the throttle's there waiting for me to green light, I'm off again. Okay, we'll do an up change. We've just come around that side, and my beautiful wife is helping me today. So to do an up change, we've accelerated. I want to go into second. I roll off, up, back off. Now what I find people do, they try and downshift. They try and rev match the gears to the speed, and that's very difficult to do because you've not got that clutch to feather it. So what I generally do is obviously give the bike or the revs a lot longer time to die down before going on the downshift. And again, it's just a simple case of rolling off the power, so you've not got power on when you make a gear change. Roll off, downshift, and if you just come around that side, if you treat this as a soft, gentle cushion and rather than something to stamp on, because you're actually getting a little bit of clutch slip. If you do it delicately and slowly, you're getting a little bit of clutch slip, and that just softens the blow of the gear change. So on a downshift, wait for the revs to drop, roll off, down, and do it gently and sweetly, and you'll get a really nice gear change. If you're coming up and you've been doing, say, 40 miles an hour, and you come up to a red traffic light, you don't need to speed match your downshifts. All you'll simply do, roll up to the junction in fourth, and then when you're stationary, then you've got all the time in the world to just knock it down into first, or into neutral even. Then when you're ready to go, so I'm sat in neutral now, traffic lights, oh, kill switch is on. So the traffic lights, I've got them in neutral, they go green, I just knock it off, and away we go. So actually, the bike is designed to be very easy to ride. The reason it's not got a clutch is so you can, it was designed for the Japanese market and the Japanese noodle delivery riders where they needed a hand spare to carry the things. So you can essentially ride this one-handed. You've just got to remember to be gentle on that gearbox. When you talk about people just slamming it into the next gear, that's what's going to do it damage. If you're always rolling off on the up change and rolling off on the down change, you're treating that engine sweetly. And there's a reason why some of these engines are lasting to sort of 40,000 miles without any work on them, just because they're being ridden right. You know, if you're gentle with them, they'll last forever. If you're harsh with them, they won't last, and it's as simple as that. Like any engine, really. So that's it. That's how to ride a postie bike. Very easy. You've just got to remember you've got no clutch, but you've still got gears. So yeah, hopefully see you down here. Right, cheers.